What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with Tech Daily, and in this video, we're going to be comparing the LG K55 to the LG Stylo 6. Now, these are the two newest phones from LG, of course. They both come in at a pretty competitive price, which is nice. And I think both of them are certainly worthy enough to be your next smartphone, though each device has its own unique features and selling points that might make one a better buy over the other. So hopefully this video helps you decide which phone might be the better option for you. There's obviously a lot to talk about here, so I won't waste any more time. Let's go ahead and jump right into it and see how these phones stack up. First things first, let's talk about pricing and availability. These phones are going to be available through Boost, Metro, and T-Mobile carriers, along with likely a few other places later in the year, and probably as unlocked devices as well. The K51 is going to be the cheaper of the two phones, and depending on where you pick up this device, you might actually be able to get a really good deal. Boost Mobile, for example, has a retail price on this device at $149, but right now they're running a promotion where you can actually buy this phone for $89. And it's a similar story with the Stylo 6 as well. The original retail price for this phone comes in at around $220, but again, through Boost Mobile, you can get this device at a discount and pay as little as $179. Obviously, both of these phones are a far cry from the $1,000 flagship devices we usually see, which is great. But either way you look at it, you're going to be paying quite a bit more money, perhaps up to $100 or more, for the Stylo 6 over the K51. And at these price points, I think that is a significant factor to consider. And by the way, if you guys are interested in doing some comparison shopping of your own, or maybe want to pick up one of these devices for yourself, I will have links down below in the video description to where you can buy these phones at their cheapest current prices. So be sure to check down there so you don't miss out on any good deals. Physically, both the K51 and Stylo 6 look and feel sort of similar, but there are a couple differing features that are worth noting. When it comes to their size, these are both really big phones. The K51 is a fairly large 6.5-inch smartphone, but even at that size, it's still a bit smaller than the huge 6.8-inch Stylo 6. These are some of the cheapest big phones you can buy right now, and I think if you're deciding between the two, it might be best to try them out in person if you have the chance to. The K51 at its size I think is still relatively manageable, even one-handed. It's not for everyone, but falls within the realm of what people might be used to. The Stylo 6, on the other hand, is a really big phone, and even for someone like me, stretching to reach every corner of the screen is a bit of a struggle. Most of the extra size is actually in height. The Stylo 6 is more than 4 millimeters taller, though the K51 is a tiny bit wider. And actually, the Stylo 6 has quite a bit of thickness to it as well. Both of these phones don't do much to try and hide their size. Neither has any sort of tampered edges or sloping sides. They're very boxy phones, but the Stylo 6 in particular is chunky with thick, flat sides that you really feel in the hand. When it comes to the materials, these are both budget phones, so we're dealing with a mostly plastic build, though I think LG did a nice job offering materials and a design that still conveys a sense of quality. With the Stylo 6 in particular, you get this glossy finish with a shiny rainbow effect and polished chrome edges that altogether make this phone look like a $1,000 flagship. The K51 isn't bad either. It also has a glossy, shiny finish that's made to mimic glass, though obviously a bit less colorful. I do think the Stylo 6 looks particularly good though. That's my choice design-wise, but both phones are solid with their look and feel. And even at these prices, there's nothing really here that makes these phones feel cheap. I think probably the one thing that does give away the price point with these two phones is the design with the front displays. Across the top, both phones have a camera notch. The designs are a little different, with the Stylo 6 having a more prominent setup, while the K51 has that sloping, almost V-shaped notch. And I actually like that a little more. I think it blends in better. Towards the bottom, both phones have a little thicker chin, though the K51 obviously has a significantly larger bottom bezel, which I think stands out quite a bit more. All in all, while a hole punch camera cutout and slimmer borders might have been nice, I can't really complain. The design on each phone is about on par with most other 2019 and 2020 devices in this under $200 price range. Taking a look around at everything else, on the left side, both phones have the volume buttons and a dedicated Google Assistant button, with the Stylo 6 also having its SIM and SD card tray down there as well. On the right, both phones have the power buttons, and this is where the K51 has its own SIM and SD card tray. And at the bottom, both phones have a headphone jack, USB-C port, speaker, and the Stylo 6 of course has its built-in stylus, which I will talk about in a second. Around back, you can see that multi-camera camera setup on each device. I will go more in depth with the camera in a bit, but below that you'll also see that both phones do have a fingerprint sensor. As far as I can tell, these are likely the same. They're equally as fast and accurate, and the placement is pretty solid even with such big phones. I personally like that LG has a dedicated physical sensor and not the in-display reader. That's just what I prefer to use. And actually, the fingerprint reader is the only biometric unlocking method for either of these two phones. LG has ditched Face Unlock completely, unfortunately, so the fingerprint sensor is all you have. The defining feature, of course, and probably the sole reason for even considering the Stylo 6, is that built-in stylus and the corresponding apps and features that go along with it. The stylus on the Stylo 6 is located down below, and when you pop it out, you'll be greeted by an array of app shortcuts and other stylus-related features you can utilize. At a bare minimum, you can just use the stylus to tap, touch, and swipe your way through the phone, just like using your finger. But beyond that, the stylus can be used to write notes and memos, draw pictures, color, message between friends with draw chat, capture screen recordings as GIFs, and a few other useful things. Now, I do think the Stylo 6 is a decent enough phone on its own, but the whole point of this device is the fact that it does have that stylus. That's sort of what you're paying for, in my opinion, and it is one of the few phones on the market right now to even offer it. Though it's technically not the only reason this phone is more expensive than the K51, you do get a bit more in other areas, which I will get into. I think you just kind of have to decide if the stylus is something you can make good use of, because at the end of the day, there are plenty of other good phones, both from LG and other brands, without a stylus at similar or even cheaper price points. I know not everyone will appreciate the stylus, and that's fine, but I think if you're considering the Stylo 6 in particular, it's likely that the stylus itself and stylus-related features are what you're in it for. And by the way, if you maybe just want to try and use a stylus with a K51, you kind of can do that. It's not perfect. The screen sometimes misses the touches and taps, and obviously you don't get the special apps and features to go along with it, but it is sort of technically possible, I suppose. In regards to the displays, this is another area where paying more for the Stylo 6 gets you something a bit better. The K51 offers a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display at a resolution of 1560 by 720 and packing in around 264 pixels per inch. The larger 6.8-inch Stylo 6 is also an IPS LCD panel, but it has a resolution of 2460 by 1080 and offers around 395 pixels per inch. For LCD displays, I think the viewing experience on both phones is mostly fine. I do wish the Stylo 6 got a little brighter, and maybe when you start to approach this price point on this phone, you could argue that AMOLED would have been a better choice, but I think either way, this setup is something I can live with. Viewing angles are pretty decent, there's great color, and all in all, for LCD displays, while you should keep your expectations in check, obviously, there's not a whole lot to complain about. The thing you have to consider here with these two phones, though, is that the screen resolution is quite a bit higher on the Stylo 6, of course. You've got a lot more pixels packed into an even bigger display, and that's something I think most people would be able to pick out. The Stylo 6 is just going to look sharper and more detailed, even from normal viewing angles, and especially when reading text on a page. If screen quality is something you're sort of nitpicky about, the Stylo 6 is going to be the better device, of course. Though, like I said, to be completely honest, there are countless other phones, even at the $200 price point, that offer nicer displays than either of these LG devices. One thing LG did a really nice job on, though, is the out loud listening experience. Surprisingly, both of these phones have dual stereo speakers. There's one speaker in the earpiece and one more down below. For the Stylo 6, I think that's really great, but for the K51 especially, having dual stereo speakers on a device under $100 is really unheard of. Stereo speakers is just something I personally really value, and having this good of a setup on these inexpensive devices is just a nice change. Inside, the phones each offer a different set of specs, though the real-world results might actually surprise you. When it comes to the battery, both the Stylo 6 and the K51 offer the same 4000 mAh capacity. The difference here is that the slightly smaller, lower resolution display may require less power from the K51, and paired with less powerful specs, you may be able to get a bit better better battery life throughout the day on this phone over the Stylo 6, just depending on your usage. Either way, both phones can last the day and then some, and while neither phone offers wireless charging, the only other difference is that the Stylo 6 can charge via the 18-watt fast charging standard, while the K51 has just a 10-watt plug, and I think I do value that fast charging. Powering the K51 is the MediaTek Helio P22 processor, paired with the GE 8320 GPU, 3GB of RAM, and 32GB of built-in storage. The Stylo 6 has a slightly better processor, the MediaTek Helio P35, the same GPU, the 8320, and actually the same RAM, 3GB, with twice the built-in storage at 64GB. Now, there's a few things worth noting here. First off, if it wasn't obvious, paying more for the Stylo 6 actually doesn't get you significantly better specs. And this, I think, more than anything just shows how underpowered the Stylo 6 is, unfortunately. This phone probably deserved another gigabyte of RAM and a faster processor. On the other hand, while the Stylo 6 ships with Android 10, the K51 is somehow still stuck on Android 9 with no update in sight. That's not great considering we're basically halfway through 2020, and a fresh update and better optimized UI might have been a good move on this phone. Interestingly enough though, in this side-by-side test, the K51 is often just as fast or even faster than the Stylo 6, which is really surprising. And there's sort of two sides to this. First off, even with last year's software, I think the K51 actually can perform quite well for the price. And conversely, the Stylo 6 really deserved more in my opinion. Obviously, both phones are heavily skinned with LG's own Android theme, so you won't be getting away from that no matter where you go. And when it comes to gaming, once again, I sort of have two thoughts. I don't necessarily think either phone is particularly good for gaming. Launching and loading graphics-heavy apps can really take a while on both devices. But once again, the K51 tends to keep up with the Stylo 6. It's only a couple seconds behind in getting to the main screen of Call of Duty Mobile, for example, which is really surprising. But aside from just taking a while to get to the main screen, when you finally do get into a game, I actually think both phones perform pretty well. There's a bit of frame drop from time to time, but games are playable on both devices, and for the price, I think that's really good. I wouldn't exactly say that one phone is any better than the other, which I think mostly helps the K51. If you want a cheap phone that performs well, that's definitely the device for you, but the Stylo 6 I think is still pretty good in its own right. Finally, when it comes to the cameras, LG I think really stepped up their game here with the setup on these budget phones. The Stylo 6 gets a huge upgrade over last year's Stylo 5 with a new 13 megapixel main lens, 5 megapixel ultra-wide lens, and a 5 megapixel depth sensor thrown in there as well. But not to be outdone, the K51 actually has a similar setup, a 13 megapixel main lens, 5 megapixel ultra-wide, and a slightly less capable 2 megapixel depth sensor. With the features and software, you're getting mainly the same shooting modes and settings, 1080p video, portrait mode, LG's AI cam, and a couple other little things here and there. Neither phone has night mode, which is a shame, but considering where these phones were last year, it is still a huge improvement. Again though, the setup here really I think favors the K51 only because it's nearly the same as the significantly more expensive Stylo 6. And it's a similar story up front too. Both phones have a 13 megapixel selfie camera, and taking a look at a couple samples here, you can see that the image isn't too bad at all. The front cameras have come a long way, and I'd argue that the selfies are honestly pretty good, really. It wasn't that long ago that budget phones like these had just absolutely terrible cameras, single lens setups even, so it's nice to see LG stepping up their game and offering a decent setup on each device. So here are my final thoughts. I think this is actually a really close comparison for two reasons. The LG 6 is a solid phone. It's one of the biggest devices you can buy for the price. It's a really good looking phone, at least from the back. And the Stylus is the defining factor that separates it from nearly every other phone on the market. But it is still a bit underpowered, I think. The K51 is another great big device for the price. And coming in at under $100 with all you get, it's actually a crazy good value. This might be surprising, but I might be inclined to choose the K51 in this case. I think you're just getting more bang for your buck. But what do you guys think? Which phone would you prefer? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow Tech Daily on Twitter and subscribe to the Tech Daily YouTube channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys later.